Hi, everybody. There was no countdown, so I took Fred by surprise a little bit.
I,
we
I was
are,
fine. You know me. I don't care. I
yep.
live stream
This
so
is
much.
this is super relaxed. We've both done this enough. We know what's happening. We are going to be building an entire world in probably under 2 hours. No, it's not going to be a fully fleshed out world. No, it won't be ready for people to run games in it. This
Oh,
is
rubbish. It'll be
just
ready in 30 seconds. Just
all
come
right.
on.
30 seconds,
30 seconds.
ready go.
30 seconds, ready to go. Exactly.
All right.
People think I'm being sarcastic, and I'm not.
It's really not. I mean, if you've seen Fred's streams, you know he's not kidding. All right, we're just here to generate some ideas, screw around, have a good time, make some nonsense. So, question for you, Fred. How do you usually start these things? This is basically what you do
Oh,
like
yes, yes,
4 more times a week.
Well, yeah, I live stream a lot, but world building only comes up every 2 months. So every 2 months on my channel, we build another world, and it's funny when people say, "Oh, what's your own homebrew world like? Like, which one are you talking about?" Because I just once I've finished with it, I just right away, it's like it's toilet paper. I just move on to the next thing. So so literally, for those of you who are wondering how this all starts, there's a thing. This is a blank piece of paper. Okay. It's very
That's
difficult
it.
to find. It's a blank piece of paper, A4 size. If you want bigger paper or smaller, it's up to you. This is
Truly
a Sharpie
specialized
pen.
equipment here.
Sharpie pen, right? I mean, you can use a ballpoint, but I find because if I'm doing this live, nobody can see the ballpoint, but they can see the Sharpie pen. And essentially, I just draw a few wiggly things to represent kind of what I sort of might like as my something like that. Okay, so that there it is. There's my world. The
We've
continent,
got our continents.
my
Boom.
continents. Yeah. Now that's it. That took me less than 30 seconds. So I was lying. It actually takes slightly less time to do it than you might expect. And you might be saying, well, Fred, hey, that's not enough. Where's the rest? Well, we're just going to build it as we go. And
That's
I
true.
I do that as a product of just coming up with ideas as I go. Some of the ideas will be garbage. Some of the ideas will be great. Some of the ideas I will like. Some of the ideas the players will like, and potentially some of the players will hate them as well. But it doesn't matter because your world can change and morph. This is the problem when you have a world where there's multiple civilizations potentially living on it, is that everybody has a different view of the world. So
This is true.
how do you go about, because look, when I draw something like that, that's just the basic rough out. How do you go about like mapping your world? Is that the first point you start at, or do you start at a different point? Because I'm kind of curious.
I actually do exactly the opposite of what you do. I mean, that we've always had. There's a conversation about, whether you build your worlds outside in or inside out. I always go inside out because if I'm gonna, usually when I'm building a world, I'm going to use it to run a game. I start with the most important things first, and that's what the players are going to see. Like they won't care if there's like 4 other continents over there. That's not going to interact with the story at any point. So I think we'll do this one outside in because I don't think I've ever built a world that way, and I kind of want to try it and see how it goes.
So I'm kind of curious. So we can go back to where I was going because that's fine. But what I do essentially can take place in probably, if you weren't live streaming, you could probably get it done in an hour and you're ready to go. And you would have quite a lot of elements there if you wanted to, because I know it's freaky to sort of go into a situation, say, okay, I've got one piece of paper with some squiggly lines on it. And you know what I mean? I know the fear factor will be there for sure, but I'm kind of curious. You're saying you're going from the opposite direction. So do you start small? You start with what the players are working with first. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah. So usually like when I start a player with, lately I've been running games completely ad lib, just all improvised, going in with no prep, and I have to build a world that way, like as we're playing. So the players will come to me with characters, and they will have little bits of elements in their backstories, like say, "Hey, I'm a paladin of the god of combat and competition," and I'll be like, "Okay, cool. So we need to make a temple of this god," and I'll start there and build a story about maybe it's the setting just takes place inside or underneath that temple, and I'll just go from what little seeds the players give me in their backstories.
So would that mean that the first thing you would do is you would draw a map or a picture of what you think the temple is, or the monastery or church or whatever the heck it is?
No, I would not draw a picture at all. I would just write a single sentence description of what the inside might look like.
Okay. All right.
And then once we hit the break, in the middle of the session, I will Google whatever battle map I think we might need, rip it off of Reddit or wherever it is, and throw it into a virtual tabletop.
Right.
And it takes 5-10 minutes tops.
Right, which is very sensible. So there's another approach that I've used. So sometimes, because you're right, sometimes you don't want to necessarily give the players the entire world. Here's the continents. You don't know what the name of the continents are at present because you haven't put down the names of the continents. You don't know what the name of the world is, but I'll get to that. But there's another approach you can do, which is essentially the same. And that is, you start with the location they start at. And usually, a lot of adventures, even if it's science fiction or fantasy, you start in a town. You start in a small settlement of some kind. It's a village, it's a town. Yeah. You might have a city, but a city's a pain in the ass because cities are bigger, right?
Yeah.
But
creating cities is so hard.
And it's not like you just duplicating what you do with a village or a town, because there are different elements to a village is slightly different to what a town is. But with a town, the structure to a town is always the same. They usually follow kind of like the old Wild West layout, and I'll describe that in a second. And actually, I will build one in a couple of seconds as well, really quickly. So the idea is that you either have a main road, or you have a crossroads, and all the buildings in the center of your town revolve around those key roads, right? That's all you wind up doing. Now you could just Google and find one that somebody's already made, or of course you can draw your own if you want to make everything your own thing. How much time does it require to actually do that? Well, there's usually the same sorts of buildings. Most towns follow the same layout, so you can actually, whatever you make, you can probably repurpose for the next town.
This is true. Literally just slap a new name on everything, random generate the NPCs in there, and it's a new place.
Yeah. So to give you an idea of, now, even though I said Western town, a lot of Western towns follow the same layout and format as European towns and villages, okay? Because your ancestors who came from Europe are doing the same thing that they know that has been done in the past. The only difference is the way they construct their buildings, because the construction of their buildings will be dependent on their weather. And if they are smart and not stupid like people who built stuff in New Zealand, they will actually build houses that will deal with the elements. And my understanding is that America's pretty good at doing that sort of thing. But that's not your issue. So with a town, and if I was starting off from scratch, I would just do a main road, and then I would decide, okay, I need some main buildings coming off that, and I would just position them roughly where I think I need them to be. It doesn't even have to be all of them. It just needs to be a few just to get me started, and then of course, labeling comes after. So your town is that.
Done.
That's it. Now,
there.
All you need now is a name for your town, and you need to decide what those buildings are. And really,
we are going to call it Ogtown.
Ogtown.
Ogton. Ogton.
It could be Ogtown for sure. And then of course, then you label. Now, one of the things that I like to do, and whether you're using the continent map or you're using just a town map, is I will be as lazy as I possibly can. And so I will just say, what do you think the name of the town is to my players? Some players hate that. Some players love it. The great thing about a world map in particular is you can never go wrong with what they do, because every culture on a world has a different name for their world. And if you think about Earth, right, every continent, every location has a different name. They pronounce it differently, it sounds differently, has a different meaning. So that means that every player at your table can be completely right about their interpretation of what the name of the world is for the culture they came from.
Exactly.
And if it's not their culture, it's some other culture. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. Like if you have multiple continents and the players think one thing and you think another, that's two different continents. You're done. You don't have to make one person be wrong.
Well, not even that. Even if you decide to name them yourself, even if they make up different names for those continents, that's just what it's called in the culture that they come from. So each continent can have a different name.
Everyone's going to have a different name for each continent. That's like assuming each continent has its own culture and there's 3 continents, that is a total of 9 names.
Yes.
That you can just like shuffle around as needed.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, and with 4 or 5 people, so you can never really go wrong. And if somebody comes up with a name that you hate and you don't want to ever have to look at it again, you can just cross it out. It doesn't matter, but all the other ones are there. You know what I mean?
So
it gives you the best of both worlds.
It does, truly. With your town map that you flashed on screen for real quick, there's only so much to go off of. So we're going to start with, we have 7 buildings. We're going to have to name those, and the only other thing on the map is a road. Yeah. And I personally have never actually named a road in my game before, which is a problem that we're going to fix right now.
All right.
I think Ogden Road is dumb, but like realistic.
So here's one of the things that is very common, and you can do the same thing in your fantasy games. They would often name the main road of a town or even a village, but often a town or a city, after a king or a queen, or a lord of some kind. Because if there was a lord, if there's a town, there's probably a castle or a fortress of some kind where they can be protected, and it will be named after them. Because if you didn't do that, they were just going to take the sign away and put their name there anyway. Because that's what lords and kings and queens do. So it's quite common to have Victoria Avenue or Victoria Road or the King's Road. This is why we have the King's Road in the Forgotten Realms, and because Elmore knows perfectly well how they name roads. So you can do that same thing. The road can just be called the King's Road, could be called the Queen's Road if you've got a queen, because the king died strangely from being poisoned by some sort of drink that was being consumed late at night for some. Kind of weird how that happened. That's a common way of naming things, is you just go, okay, it's the King's Road, and we're done.
All right, so we need in order to name the road, the castle, and in one fell swoop, we just need to name the local lord, pretty much.
Yeah.
But
you don't even have to worry about the castle yet, because you're not there yet.
But we already have a name for it, and we haven't even started.
Yeah, so you've got a name, and then your buildings. You've got. I've drawn 7 buildings. 7 buildings is probably about right. So one of them is probably going to be a general store. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, a classic. Because it might even be one of the only. It would be the only store that's purely mercantile.
Yeah.
Well, the town's not big enough for more than one of those.
Yeah, and almost always you're going to have a smithy, a blacksmith, because you got to get things repaired. That's just a reality. And
you will probably also have a carpenter for the same reason. You need things repaired, built. Well, it depends on what the local. What the local material is. Like if you're in the middle of the forest, it's going to be a carpenter. If you're in the middle of the mountains, it'll probably more likely be a stonemason.
Yep, exactly. So you and it's entirely possible that you may have just a mill. Maybe there isn't any forest nearby. You're in the middle of a desert. It's quite common, right, in North America. A lot of towns popped up and there's nothing there. They had to ship all that stuff there. So you just have a mill. Instead of one of the buildings being like a shop, it's just a windmill. And The reason I say windmill is windmills are one of those things that have dual purposes. One, they help pump water, but they also help grind grain. So if you've got farms around you, they'll be grinding grain. If you have a windmill, there's a chance that it might be cycling water to power something. So the water wheel is a piece of technology that's been around a long, long time. And so most definitely, if you've got a river running through your place, you'll probably have the windmill right next to it. So it's got a water wheel running to do all those things.
Let's do that. Let's put a river on the map. And before we get too far into figuring out what buildings are actually there, I think we need to figure out what biome it's in first, because like there's going to be different buildings, like you said, for desert, mountains, grasslands, forest. What kind of thing are we doing? I have a forest background up right now, so we're making this a forest town, I guess.
There you go. Got a forest town, which means you've probably got a woodworker and a grinding mill of some kind. You know, you've probably got a windmill of some kind. Somebody's already provided the name of the general store.
Yep, I already got it up here. Velkor's Varieties. Thanks, Norak.
And we just need a name for the windmill, whatever it might be. It might be based off the name of the town.
Windmills usually have names?
Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's just a windmill. It's not specifically got a name attached to it. Your blacksmith will usually have a name attached to it. It'll be the name of the owner or whatever they decided they want their brand to be. But again, these are things that you don't need to necessarily worry too much about. Mm-hmm. Because your players can name a lot of this stuff. And there's so many conventional. I mean, how many blacksmiths have people seen in old westerns? The name of I'm a blacksmith as you're going down the street. Oh, okay, there we go. All right, I can just take that name and you just transition it in. There's another aspect that I say when it comes to world building is use your own personal experience. Anything you've seen in the real world, either in your own hometown, city, the village you're living in, places that you've been before, anything that you've seen that you remember, like that's a good thing to put down. You can use those things. If something you've seen on TV, something you've seen at the movies, something you've read in a book or seen in a piece of artwork, all of those things can be quite useful. And then there's the other thing is sometimes you don't need to do anything other than just name it saloon, smithy. It doesn't even have to have a name.
I feel like that's a cop-out. I like names. It's very true that, like, you know, if the town is small and remote enough, when you say the smithy, there's only one possible place you could go without, you know, a week's worth of travel. So,
yeah.
If we're going off of stories we've heard, we're going to go with Christ's carpentry, right? He was a carpenter.
Yeah, you can do Christ's carpentry if you want. I believe that the grinding mill has been named already in chat.
Yep, Greta's Grinder.
Yes, well done, well done.
I like it.
So clearly Norok is one of the players in this game.
One of the players that will be contributing heavily to this new world.
Yeah. I mean,
and I see we're going with a theme. So Velkor's Varieties, Christ's Carpentry, Greta's Grinder. I went ahead and named the Smith Martin's Metal because we like our alliteration here in this here town.
Well, we got to have a tavern or a saloon. I mean, whether it's a saloon or it's a tavern, because first thing the players want to do is they want to go and get pissed.
Yeah, every time.
Every time.
Without fail. It's kind of like you know, the place to go to pick up quests too, because that's where the people are. That's where they hang out because everybody likes getting drunk, you know?
Yep.
So we're gonna name it Tammy's Tavern.
There you go, Tammy's Tavern, lovely. And then, so so we've got 3 more buildings to fill out. What are some pretty basic things you find in a town? And I would say probably the next thing is a dentist or a doctor, and the jailhouse.
I was going to say jail, yeah.
Jailhouse or the prison. It won't be necessarily called a prison, but it'll be the jailhouse or the courthouse. It might serve the same thing. It might the courthouse and the
Those
jailhouse.
usually don't have names.
No, they're
The
just the jail.
jailhouse usually like Jimmy's Jail. No, you're not selling anything here.
No. Yeah, it would be bad taste. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The deep hole jailhouse, like or Hell's jailhouse. It's sort of
Yeah, the opposite of selling. You want to keep them out of here.
yeah. But an inn or a hotel or motel, something like that, somewhere that they can stay. You might.
No, in all my worlds, it's always an inn/tavern. Those are always the same place because that's where the characters are going to go anyway.
Yep.
Both of those places every time.
Yep. But if you think in terms of historically, they didn't necessarily operate that way. Sometimes they were, and sometimes they weren't. True. Because it's very hard to sleep when everybody is screaming, yelling, and singing and getting pissed. Do you know what I mean? So you kind of want to separate them. Yeah, putting them in the same building with really thin walls that haven't got proper modern insulation, probably not going to do that well. So you can separate them, make them different. And the last square I've kind of left, I haven't said anything about it. And that could be, as I said dentist, doctor. And that probably covers most of the things that you'd be looking at in a really small town. You think about all the things that you might need. I've come from a small village. I used to live in a small village, and there were literally 5 shops. So there's nothing else. If you want anything else, you have to go somewhere else. But what makes the difference between a town and a village, from what I've been told and the research I did, is it must have a marketplace. Now, the marketplace is usually just a section of ground that's got grass on it. And they set it up and break it down each day, and they run a market there for selling goods for people in the area.
So the difference is like whether or not there's few enough buildings where the whole town is the marketplace, or if it's big enough where there are houses there that are purely residences. They don't sell stuff out of their homes. They bring their wares to this central marketplace because that's more convenient for everybody.
Well, actually, no. You'd normally have some shops as part of your town or some major buildings within a town. But there's also another location, and it's not a structure. It's just a space. Because I didn't realize, but if you look at European history, you had to go to the person who owned that land, that area, the lord, and get permission to call it a town rather than a village. And the only way to do that was to get permission to run and differentiate it, is that you had to have a marketplace area. So it was basically, they just used a green field that was right next to the town, or in amongst the town. It might have even been the town square, and that's where they would set it up each day, and then they would break it down. And that was the difference, is you just needed to get permission. It's like a permit to say you can legally operate a market in this place, and you can call yourself a town because I've said you can. And who would make that decision? The lords.
Yep. And they were very partial to making town because that means more money for them moving through there.
Yep.
More taxes.
Oh,
more collection.
So yeah, that's the gist of doing a town. I mean, you want to name all those things, you're welcome to. But again,
we're just gonna go with a village for now.
Yeah. And what would be the name of the village?
Our nice 7 building. Ogden.
Ogden.
No, it's not a town. We can't call it Ogden. Ogville.
Ogville. So Ogden is not a town. Why is it not a town?
Not yet. Not yet. It wants to become one. They have not yet gotten that permit, though.
Oh, that's right. So it's still a village. Oh, it's still a village.
That's right.
There we go. All right. And people might be thinking, "Oh, hang on, that seems like that can't be the world building." Is that all we're talking about today? I mean, seriously? No, it's not. It's not, people. It really isn't. Yeah.
No, we're let's see. The video title said we are world building. I think is something about building a whole world in 2 hours is something that I
We can do that.
claimed. So we've got a town to start in.
Well,
I
look,
think we can.
we're almost there then. Uh, so I don't know where you get your sources of inspiration for world building, but I generally pull them from personal experience about the world that I know of so far. The real world. I use
Yes,
modified
that one.
history. I take a lot of history and I modify it. I use science fiction. I use fantasy worlds that I've seen before or heard about. I steal from pop culture, Middle Earth, Oz. I'm a big fan of The Wizard of Oz,
I
Narnia.
have not read Oz. That's one that is on my to read list, along with everything else. But that is one place that I draw inspiration from what I have read. Most of it is TV shows and movies for me. I don't know a whole lot of history. That's my fiance's shtick. She'll like come in and like I'll say, "Hey, did you know this interesting fact about history that this show got right?" And she's like, "Yes, I know that. You don't have to tell me."
Yeah.
But so that's where most of my stuff comes from, and it's all just like floating around in here somewhere. Sometimes I don't even know where the actual inspiration comes from, and just like I'll have an idea and think it's cool and don't know why.
Yeah, and of course the other thing too is, if you get players who are willing to write a bit of a backstory, I'm 51. I'm not of the opinion that I want all of my players to write a backstory that are completely isolated from all the other characters. I always give people enough of a seed of what I intend to do, they can build the character for the campaign. And
Yes, make them
essentially,
work for you.
yeah, rather than me trying to take 4 or 5 different threads and tie them together like some miracle worker. I don't like to torture myself that
I
way.
always really, really loved doing that, at least starting out. Like, okay, go make your backstories, and I'll solve this puzzle and figure out how to put them all together in a cool way. But lately, now that I'm running more and more games for more and more different people, like I've been running a lot of like one-shots for new players on different Discord servers, and I'll say, okay, here's the seed. Build it around this. This is a setting, location sort of thing that we'll be playing in. Connect your character to this somehow, please. You don't have to, but if you don't, it won't be as your character won't be as tied in because I don't have time to look at your specific character.
Yeah. That doesn't mean you don't take their backstories into consideration. It just means that their backstory needs to work for you rather than make your life more difficult. Because it's impossible to tie 5 Lone Wolf, Chuck Norris, or Arnold Schwarzenegger characters together. It's actually easier just to kill them off and start again.
Yes, which you have done many times.
Many times. But player input is really helpful during the game and before the game. And if you can get that stuff, and I always like a paragraph. And more than a paragraph, I start to get upset. but I'm 51, and so my approach is a little different. It doesn't mean I haven't done it the other way, but it requires significantly more brain power and a lot more effort and work. And then we did the map thing, so you can draw the map yourself. How much technical drawing skill do you need to do what I just did? Like pretty little.
You need a crayon.
You need a crayon and a blank piece of paper. And there's so many different ways you can do it. Scribble on a piece of paper, or use whatever it is. Software's fine, but I never considered software an option unless I had time to actually learn the software. And making custom maps from your scribbly drawing is actually easy enough for a lot of people to do once they know how to use the software, but that's further down the line. And there's a lot of stuff out there that do random generators. They create the entire continent for you. You don't even do anything. You just press a few buttons and it's done.
One random generator that I've seen, like an analog one, not a computer one, is I've seen a couple people generate maps by taking 1 or 2, maybe 3 dice sets and just throwing them onto the piece of paper.
Yeah.
And depending on maybe like the numbers that pop up are how big that the continent that contains that die is. Maybe the different colors of the dice mean different things. But it looked like it was really fun, but you could get the same thing done by doing exactly what you just did and just circle, wiggly circle, slightly less wiggly circle, and an archipelago in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, like you were saying, you had pulled like a map of a building, a structure. Well, you do the same thing. If you don't want to draw it, you don't have time, then you just pull from a real world location or a
Yeah.
continent, and you just draw around it. Like how many different maps or continent maps are there of Earth? Because of the over the many millions of years, like the different
Exactly.
shapes. So you can just go with whatever you like, or you just use something somebody else made and just be done with it. And just
Uh-huh.
it's called tracing, people. You just trace it, and you're done. And
And you
then
can even use like look up some of the old maps before like cartography became like an exact science.
yeah,
And you can just say the land's about here probably ish, right? That's
yeah.
good enough for what we're going to use this map for. And there's so many wonky looking maps out there for like what the actual land's shape is now. That's not what it looks like from an airplane. And they just got the like everything completely wrong. Actually, small tangent, fun story. I'm in Minnesota in the United States, and here somewhere up north there is a piece of land called the Lost 40, and it is there was this. When the settlers came, one of the biggest sources of money was lumber. So they would cut down all of the trees and just move them down the rivers, and the lumberjacks would, just wipe a forest clean. The Lost 40 was the person that was surveying the land accidentally put these 40 acres of land underwater when they're not underwater. So this Lost 40 was never cleared of wood. So that is where some of the oldest trees in the country are, because they never got cut down when the lumberjacks swept through the nation.
Oh, okay. Oh, nice, nice.
I don't know, just a fun tangent. It's a lot of fun. It's a really beautiful place too.
So we haven't named this world yet, have we? We did the village. It was going to be a town, but we've decided it doesn't have a green or a square to have its
Put a
mark
dot somewhere on there for our town.
for our town. Yeah. And
Where's our town?
This is one of the things I do is if I make a town map to go with my continent, all I got to do is just got to put dot somewhere on the landmass. Where is it going to be? And I'll put a cross on
drop
this.
the
You're
pen.
never going to see it otherwise. You'll never see where the town is. Oh, there's the cross.
There you go. Boom.
All right.
So that region of that northern continent is forest-ish.
Forestish.
So
Well, it might
maybe
be forestish. There might be a bit of desert there at the bottom. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't give a shit right now because I haven't decided. So I'm going to call it blue. I decided I'm going to call it like blue tag, BLU. You can call it whatever you like, Dennis. And for those of you in chat, you're welcome to call this world whatever you like. Okay. I understand that in the real world we call Earth, like as in dirt. Like
Yes.
is a big rock. Is it the third rock from the sun? So you can call. I mean, your name for your world could not get more stupid than calling a planet Earth, as in soil.
It's true.
Or
We
dirt.
are quite unimaginative when it comes to naming things.
Yeah. So there's no such thing as a bad name for your fantasy world, or your science fiction world, because in real life they do it worse. So you don't know. And the continents, we can name them later. Oh, Noroak's decided it's going to be called Mysteric. Sure, you can do that. So we got a world, we got a village. What else do we need?
We need geopolitical lines at some point.
Oh, geopolitical lines. I don't even go there. Do you know why I don't go there, Dennis?
It's
because
difficult, and it's
difficult.
more work than is necessary.
It is. It's more work than it's necessary, but also too, it's a different level of world building. Almost always, I find when people jump to that one, I'm like, you've been watching too much Matthew Colville or Matthew Mercer, Matthew Colville in particular, and you're actually dealing with the sorts of things that you incorporate into your world once you actually play with it a bit. Do you know what I mean? That geopolitical
That's true.
stuff.
You don't quite know what feels right until you've been there and you know what sort of what what sort of ruler would have this effect that we've created on this land? That is probably the best starting point to make it feel more realistic instead of figuring out, like we were talking about earlier, outside in. Like you could build it that way. But I think for this case, I agree. It is more difficult to do, to start with the ruling parties and move down into what effects they have in the land. You start with the effects on the land and figure out who did that.
Well, also too, that's where the adventure comes in. The adventures that you run within it with your group will write that for you. And I think a lot of people, I don't know about you, but I find a lot of people, when they start talking about world building, what they're actually talking about, campaign story or campaign goal or campaign adventure, or they're talking about the actual adventures that will take place within the world. It's not actually the world building side. World creation stories are actually really helpful because they are the mythology of your world. And if you wanted to have mythology in a world, all you need to do is have a creation story, and all the rest comes off that pretty easily. So what is your world creation story? No one really knows because, of course, it's just a theory. It's a
Personally,
legend, it's a myth.
I always have, if I'm spending more time in a world with a longer term campaign, there will be multiple creation stories from multiple different cultures, and they will all be wildly different. Maybe like there's one seed of truth that is the same among all of them, and that's really fun for the players to go in and find that once they know all three of these stories. So what do we know about this? Okay, all of these stories start with there were two gods at the beginning.
Yeah.
All of them have that, and like that's the only piece of truth. Everything else is just crap. It's made up from, to serve some purpose in that culture.
Exactly. Multiple, so that your world is always going to have multiple stories. And the great thing is all you need to do is know what the basic general theme and structure of creation stories are. And as I have the 6 creation stories in front of me.
All right.
So I'm gonna list them off, and somebody can pick one. Hell, if there's 6, you could roll a 6-sided dice and just do it that way. It doesn't really matter, because if you don't like
I want to hear all of them, and then we'll roll a die.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. So the first one I've got here: the world is created by a supreme being. That's basically your Christianity. It's like God created the,
monotheistic view.
Yeah. Then you've got the world emerging over a long period of time as a metamorphosis. Good Lord, I can't say that word again. There's so much trouble with that. But basically,
metamorphosis.
Yes. I mean, you could view this kind of like evolution, Darwin evolution. I suppose you could look at like it that way, or you could view it like a chrysalis becoming, from the caterpillar into the chrysalis, becoming the butterfly, and maybe your world sort of emerges that way. You can have the two primal gods, like a mother-father beings, supreme beings that give birth to the world. So they get together or do the funky-dunky, and pop, out comes the egg. There's the world. Or you can literally go into the egg concept completely and have the world hatching from a cosmic egg laid by a deity. So you're taking the chicken and the egg as your structure. Pop out the back, and there you are. And in fact, of course, chickens can have multiple eggs, so you have multiple worlds rolling around somewhere in the universe. And then, I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. You're going to have 2 companion gods, and when you have 2 companion gods, what that usually means is one is going to be good, representation of good, and the other one is a representation of evil. And often you'll see, if you look at some of the creation stories, one or the other dives into some sort of water source and pulls the world into existence. So Maui is a good example of that. In the Pacific region, Maui pulling up, my own New Zealand here, we have, the island of New Zealand pulled up by going fishing. Like, that's completely possible. You just get into a fishing boat and, I didn't catch a fish. I caught a complete island. It wasn't
here we have, there's a legend here of Mackinac Island, which is a real place, but there's a story I remember reading as a kid many times of a creation story where there were many like a couple different animals, and there was this old turtle that was like, okay, we're ready to start a world now. Someone go to the bottom of the ocean when the ocean is all water, and take some dirt and throw it on my back, and then I will become a world. Big lessons happen in the story. Muskrat wins the day, and the old turtle, turns into the first piece of land. That fishing story kind of reminds me of that.
Yep. And that's exactly what it is. And then there's the last one, and that is a god who, or gods, there might be multiple gods, you might have one god, but quite often it's multiple gods transforming the corpse of a dead giant or a dead god into the world. So for whatever reason, the gods are not quite all powerful, and they do sort of, for whatever reason, maybe there's a battle, there's a fight, and the corpse, instead of letting it just sit there, gets transformed into something else and continues on, and that becomes the world. So those are the 6 basic structures for creation stories. So you just pick one, and then you build in something that goes with that. And again, even if you don't like the creation story, it's all right, because your players can make up creation stories for you, and you just pick and choose what you like.
Mm-hmm. It's nice when you have multiple stories, and it doesn't matter yet which one is true, and you can just pick which one makes the story you're telling more interesting.
Well, they might none of them might be true. That's the great thing about it. It's like you don't have to nail down.
Wrong.
They could be all wrong.
That's a 6, so we're dealing with a dead god.
Cool. What sort of dead god can we do? I don't know.
Well, we have. I have a upcoming charity stream with J&J Tabletop, and that stream that we're going to be playing, the world they will be playing in, is a tree, like literally the world tree, except it is an actual tree. What if that tree died? That tree was a god, and now it's dead.
Okay. All right. So what you basically get is a big trunk of a tree that turns into a world. So the funny thing is that this world now is flat at 2 ends, basically, but round on the rest of it. So when people have arguments about, no, the world is flat. So no, it's actually round. They're both right.
It's a cylinder, so it's okay.
and it's just spinning around in space, rotating on an axis.
Amazing.
So we've got a dead tree. Wonderful. Cool. That was pretty easy. Yep. Well, do we have some deities? Because we've been talking about gods and goddesses and deities and world creation, but we don't actually have some deities. So we've got to do some deities, create some deities for our world. Again, I always ask my players, what deities do they worship in the world? And they say, okay, what gods are there? And I say, well, you just make up one, and we'll go from there. If I like it, I'll keep it. And I've had some players who are like, no, you need to tell me what they are. And I've had other players who say, sweet, cool, I'm going to write this up. And I usually don't.
It's literally, there's nothing in between. There's sort of like, yeah, or like, yes, I'm going to write all of them.
I find that there tends to be that approach from players. In my experience, when you do this sort of thing, there's usually either they hate it or they love it. So you can't win against a hater, but you can win against a lover. So yeah, and whether they like it or not, the lovers will do all the work for you, or certainly a good portion of it. There's all
right, lovers in chat, what are our gods?
yeah and you're thinking, okay, so yeah, but I'm just gonna come up with an idea. But here's the thing, you've got all the tools that you need, whether you're the game master or the players, because you know tons of gods from history, mythology, folklore. You can select them, you could just reuse them, I mean, unlike some companies we know, they won't show up at your door with thugs and tell you can't use them in your game, because nobody's going to know about it because it's in your private game, and 2, it's none of their business. It's common.
Very true.
So you're all good. You can steal from fantasy, science fiction, Dungeons and Dragons lore. I mean, anything. I always sort of go back to the pantheons from other cultures. I know a few people view that as sort of a misappropriation, but I think they're being a little bit ridiculous, like a lot of things on social media. And I always go like, if there's a Norse god I like, or Egyptian gods, or Greek gods, I like a lot of Greek stuff. Celtic, since my origins are kind of Celtic. Roman, which is basically just a rehash of Greek. Aztec, Hindu, Japanese, Chinese, Korean.
All amazing.
Yeah.
Like all of these stories are fantastic, and I don't know. Personally, I like mashups of popular IPs. Like, what if, I don't know, Pokemon meets Marvel? I don't know, just throwing stuff out. But if doing it in a grander scale with pantheons, say Quetzalcoatl meets Ymir from that's mixing. I want to say Aztec is where Quetzalcoatl is from, the snake god. One of their snake gods, and Ymir, the frost giant that it is actually a dead god is the world story. The entire world is within Ymir's giant blue eye, and that's why the sky is blue.
Yeah.
So you could have both of those, gods meet in a pantheon and have a story about what happens when they meet. Are they friends? Do they fight? There's a lot of I don't know. It feels like writing fan fiction about actual culture.
So my approach when I'm doing this is, one, I don't need to have all the deities in the world. I just need to have a few to get started. And whether you're pulling them from historical stuff that's got cultural stuff around it already, or you're picking it from fantasy like Galarian from Pathfinder, or the Forgotten Realms, or Greyhawk, or Dragonlance, or Eberron, or Mystara, or whatever it is, all you do is you take the ones you like. You can either adjust them or not adjust them. You can reverse the names. You can adjust some details slightly. And unfortunately, it would be great if there was a tool that just gave you a name of different pantheon gods from different cultures, and you could just go through and pick what you wanted if it was all in one place. Of course, this thing doesn't have it.
I can't help but laugh whenever I see the cover of that book, because it's like next to useless.
Yeah, it is next to useless. And this here, unfortunately, doesn't have it either.
Really?
No, it doesn't. No. And that's Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, first edition, the Dungeon Master Guide. But what does have it? At the back of this, all you do is you just open up the back. And on this, I've done this a few times.
Greyhawk, it's got Dragonlance, it's got Forgotten Realms, it's got Norse, it's got
Celtic, Greek.
Celtic, I was going to say Greek. It's also in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's got a whole bunch. And so you just pick 5. I always say start with 5. 5 is a good number. 5 you can put on your hand. 5 you can come up really quickly, and you just decide on which ones you kind of like the most. I don't know. How do you feel about this?
I feel great. Let's start with what our world is. It's a dead tree, right?
Yes, it's dead tree.
What kind of things are you going to find in a tree? What that could turn into gods? There are 2 that come to mind for me. There is Ratascotter, the squirrel god from I want to say that's also Norse, because it's World Tree. Like, all right, it's a squirrel that runs among the branches of the World Tree.
Remember, you don't necessarily have to have the gods formed on that world. The gods may have existed before that world was formed. They may be the ones who actually formed it, so you don't even need to worry about that. The problem, I think, with taking Norse names is if you just take them as they are and you try to change them, it's kind of difficult, because the
I'm just putting down Squirrel God right now.
Squirrel God, yeah.
What else is in a tree?
Nido. We're going with Nido. Nido is just Odin backwards. Nido is just Odin backwards. And this is
Nido, the god of having his other eye plucked. I don't know.
No. Well, but then of course you can take anything else along here. Nido can be related to nature and mountain peaks, for all you like, which is basically just a different god from Norse mythology. So you just switch and change them around. And those 4 or 5, whether you like them or not, you don't have to worry about it because you're gonna add more stuff as you go as you move along that you may like more. And of course, some of the stuff, gods can suddenly just vanish. It's like, where did that god go? I don't know. They just haven't been answering their messages recently. But then gods are kind of like that, aren't they? So you don't have to worry.
Mm-hmm.
So
I've got 3 now. I've got the squirrel god, who is going to be our trickster in the pantheon.
Yeah.
We've got Nido, who is wisdom and peace. We've got some sort of rot god, because it's a dead tree, right? So it's going to be a rotting log. That's probably going to be the symbolism for death and decay.
Yeah. Oh, what about Lee? As in L-E-H. Lee.
You're doing it again.
Yeah, I did it.
I don't know a whole lot about Hel, the actual goddess.
Yeah.
Other than
those of you who are unaware, we're actually talking about Hela. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Hela or Hel, and I just reversed it. It's Lee instead. And so it can be the god of death, or goddess of death. So it doesn't have to be male. In fact, gods may not have a gender. They're not restricted by the biology of your creatures on your world. So they can appear as many different things. It's just what do they prefer to appear as. You know what I mean?
So we are going to go some weird mix. We are going with Kiol, the squirrel trickster god, which will be Loki backwards. We've got Nido, wisdom and peace, which is Odin backwards. We've got Le, L-E-H, which is Hell backwards for death. What other Norse gods? I don't want to spell Jormungandr backwards.
No, and this is one of your biggest problems when you're looking at words and you're thinking, okay, I could like the idea, but I don't want to use that exactly. Is trying to reverse stuff and change things can be really, really difficult. So, well, you got Sif, and I don't think Sif works. And it's very tempting, unfortunately, for me to just be silly now and just call them like surf, as in surfing on the waves. We're going to do that.
Surf, the god of water.
Yeah.
It's done.
Surfboarding is definitely part of the agenda. Okay, so yes. So those of you who are unaware, I am prone to being silly at times. It does happen.
What? Really?
No.
This is new information to me.
It's new information. All right. Okay. So we've got our gods, and we've got a bit of information.
Yeah, we got 4, which I think is going to be good enough. Do we
have enough information on them? Do we know what they are about?
Yeah. So we've got Kiol. So what I've done is taken the 4 gods that that we've chosen out of the Norse pantheon: Loki, Odin, Hel, and Seth. And we've changed them a little bit, given them some sort of theme with the tree.
Yeah.
And made their names backwards and gender swapped them.
Yeah. Pretty much.
So we've got Kiol, the squirrel goddess, who is our trickster. We've got Nido, the goddess of wisdom and peace and old age. So, trees, old, that's a theme, right?
Yeah.
We've got Le, the goddess, the god of rot and death. Mm-hmm. And we've got Surf, the goddess of water.
Right, there you go. Cool. And that's just your beginning. You don't have to have any more than that because there's only 4 or 5 characters. If they all want to have a god or goddess, you're covered. You covered your bases. You're all good.
Exactly.
Now,
I always liked it when 2 characters have this worship the same deity too. So 4 will definitely cover us.
It's even better when the entire group decides that they are going to worship exactly the same deity.
I've always wanted to run a group like that, but I've never managed to convince the players to buy into it yet. It's in the works. I will one day.
My group did it, and we all became we were worshipping the goddess of unicorns. And eventually, as we leveled up, we wound up all riding on unicorns of all things. But there was, you might be thinking that's overpowered. That's overpowered. There's Terra. because you know that if you get the unicorn killed, your god will destroy you. You've got to make sure they don't. We did not take those unicorns into battle, man. It was like
It's not the classic. Oh, we bought horses to get from one point A to point B, and then the horses die.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
they die on the way there.
Yeah, we would have resources ready to resurrect the unicorns if they died, because we were so frightened that the consequences of losing a unicorn, being worshipping a unicorn goddess, would be just drastic. So yeah, it was like a drop ship. Fly in, drop us off, teleport back out. We'll do our thing. We'll go looking for you later on when we need you. So yeah, so locations in your world, I probably would say, is kind of one of the other things that you want to consider. And what locations?
All we have right now is a village.
That's right. We have a village, and we have a name for it though. Locations, settlements. You probably want a settlement or a city to start off with, at least one. Whether it's be a village, a town, a city, or some other type of settlement, it's up to you. But there probably needs to be at least one that you've started off with. And there's many places around the real world that you can poach. I poach the pink terraces every single time I can, even though it's been destroyed. Okay, one of my favorite things is the pink terraces, so I've got to steal that one. You almost always need a location that is your starting location, not for your world, but for your players. Like whatever they're playing, that's the thing you need to have, right? Which is why the first thing we did after the continents is the village or town, because that's where they're probably going to start. And
exactly.
How many times have you used your own hometown, home village, or home city and modified it and actually incorporated it into your own fantasy games?
Never, because I grew up in a suburb.
Okay.
And there aren't a lot of suburbs in any fantasy setting that I've ever experienced.
But a suburb is still like a microcosm. It's still like a suburb is kind of like a village. It's got its own sort of makeup.
You know, you've got your big swath of residential area, and you got your strip mall.
Yeah.
And you've got all that stuff.
Yeah. And so what you do is you just take away the modern theme, if you don't want a modern theme to it, and you just, those elements, you can even use the actual structure and street layout of your own town. This is why I say to people, it's like, because you know your own town, your own suburb, your own city, your own village so well, it is the most sensible thing to use first, because you can't possibly get it wrong. And you'll know all the ins and outs of it. And it's super easy, because you could probably sit down and draw it on a piece of paper. You'll probably remember it that well. So, and you can label it all out. Like it's a really good way to get past that. I have a blank piece of paper. I have to come up with an idea, and I have no idea what to do. So I always recommend
draw a map of your hometown.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some tools out there that allow you to build locations. I find the best tools, again, this is not necessarily the best tool. I generally find that this thing isn't great. There is some stuff, I think page 99, 109, 112, and then to 114, and then 292 to 295 in the this thing here. There's stuff in there, but if you really want a decent book, if you really want a resource or a book, don't get the Pathfinder 2nd edition Game Master Guide, because it's shit. But the 1st edition Pathfinder Game Mastery Guide, this is the pocket version, is awesome. It's really good. As a resource, would I say it's perfect? No. But as a product that I've seen amongst the many things that I've got floating around in my office, it's pretty good. It's got the tools you need. And there's so many tables, 100 of this and 100 and that. And you don't have to roll randomly. You just pick the things you like and you're done. It's pretty easy. So that's an easy way to deal with locations. So I would always think about the places you've been in the past that you enjoyed going to and write down those locations for your world. So if you haven't, Dennis, if you haven't got the pink terraces on there, I'm going to get very upset. So you've got to have
pink terraces.
Yeah, I've got to have the pink terraces.
This is something I must say I'm not familiar with, but I recognize it vaguely now that I pull it up on Wikipedia.
Yep. And so,
So essentially, what is it?
The pink terraces is basically was right next to a volcano on a mountainside, and it was terraced, and it was basically pink and white terraces. And the reason it was pink and white is because of the interplay between the minerals and the rock and the chemicals in that location. It actually changed the color of the surroundings. And unfortunately, a while back, it got destroyed at least 100 years ago by a volcanic eruption, and it got obliterated. But it was considered one of the greatest places in the world at one point, and that was in New Zealand. So what's a place that you can think of where you live that really stands out for you that you would like to incorporate into the world? Because that's what I would always say to people is, what are places that you've been? Where have you been that you really like, that you would like to have in your own world?
So, Minnesota is classically known as the land of 10,000 lakes. And the reason for that is because during the Ice Age, it was completely covered by glacier. And so when the glacier receded, it carved out 10,000 lakes into the land, just dragged the rock with it. And looking at a map of, there's a place called the BWCA, the Boundary Waters Canoe Area, where it is still preserved, and your engines aren't allowed beyond a certain point. You just drop all your technology on this side, and it's like hundreds and hundreds of miles of just, preserved lakes, and it's almost like if you look at a part like an archipelago, like several little dotted islands, turn that inside out. Those are lakes, and everything else is land. There's just lakes dotting every single corner. Like there's not a place in there where you can stand at one point, walk in one direction for more than 10 minutes and not hit a lake.
So you got to have that, man. You got to have the 1,000 lakes. And of course, our little village name should be included on those locations. And you're probably thinking, like, how many locations do I need? Because, a world's got so many different locations. 5. It's the same answer.
Rule of 5.
The rule of 5, okay? You're probably thinking, is this based on scientific information? No, it's arbitrary. It's like, how long will you be sick? Fred, how long will you be sick? 2 weeks. How long will it take for you to finish the renovations in the bathroom? 2 weeks. It's that sort of thing. So 5. If you can count it on your hand, the reason I pick 5 is because 5 you can do easily. 5 you can do in the space of a couple of minutes, and you're ready to go. And too many people build worlds and they never get them done, and so they never run them, so they will never wind up being a dungeon master.
That's right. It's so true. It's a problem.
So yeah, today's the day, people. Today's the day. If you haven't built your own world, you're going to get that damn thing done. So we've got 3.
If you have more than 5 of something, cut it down and start just putting 5 of whatever you're building. It'll work. So we've got our pink terraces. We've got our 1,000 lakes.
Yep.
What else? We've got, how about a volcano?
Oh, of course. A volcano sounds like a good idea. If we've got the pink terraces, we've got to have a volcano close by.
Yep, just so they can get destroyed and make it a part of the the story you're writing.
Yeah, Mount Egmont.
Natural disasters are fun.
How does
Don't take that out of context, please.
No. How does Mount Egmont sound to you? Mount Egmont.
Mount Egmont.
For those of you
the area around it all smells like sulfur.
Well, you could well, but Mount Egmont is actually a place here in New Zealand. So what you do is you pick something that actually does exist that your players are probably not very familiar with. Because were you aware that Mount Egmont was a place? I was not aware of 1,000 lakes. So it's easy.
I'm still struggling with the fact that it's called Mount Egmont, because if you look at it, it is Mountain Egg Mountain. That's what I'm seeing. I can't see anything else.
Which again just adds to the fact. So when you guys are naming your stuff and you're creating your locations, you might be thinking, yes, but I don't want it to sound hokey and stupid. I can assure you.
It's gonna.
I'm gonna assure you.
No matter what you name it, your players are going to find that one super obscure connection, even if it's just like a single syllable that it shares with, like, if it ends in ART. They're gonna say it rhymes with fart and make it funny.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that's just it's just something that's going to happen, and there's no way around it. So if you're comfortable with it, lean into it and just make it ridiculous. It makes it much easier and much more fun.
Well, the horrible truth is that so many locations around the world do sound utterly ridiculous in terms of their name.
They do.
The biggest problem, I think, for people when they're creating their own worlds is they don't realize that when it comes to real stuff, actually having a stupid name, people can't say, well, nobody would name a place like that because they actually did. So they're wrong. But in a fantasy world, when you name something and it sounds stupid, you're like, well, nobody in the real world would call it that. That's just ridiculous. The problem is that people just don't understand just how silly the names have gotten over the time. So yeah,
it's truly ridiculous.
It's not a product of your inability to come up with something good in your world for your locations. It's actually a problem with the people who are perceiving it, because they just haven't been exposed to enough silliness. In the real world.
It's not your fault, it's theirs.
Well, it's not even that. I think the problem is that a lot of people, you think about how many of us actually are really good with geography, unless you actually studied it at school heavily and went to university and you read lots of books about it, or you traveled extensively. You probably don't know very much about the world. So you won't be aware that these places do exist. Now, we probably have a castle. We need to have a castle, right? Because there's potentially a castle close by to this village.
That's right.
Or at least, to some degree, it's at least on the same land area that it's protecting. So a castle.
Are we making all of these natural wonders or natural locations on the same continent or within reach of our village?
I would probably not spread them out too much to start off with, because then you can use them more immediately. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, that is true.
You
don't have to wait several weeks before you get to your favorite one that you created.
Yeah, and I guess the other aspect of it too is that you don't want them to know about the rest of the world, frankly, because one, you haven't created it, but two, they haven't gone there yet. There's a nice aspect to fantasy, not so much for science fiction, because in science fiction you probably would know everything, or at least a lot of it, unless you're in the Outer Rims or you're a Star Trek going into the unknown, but the idea that venturing out from where you are used to, where your home is the unknown, and you'll find out what that place is called from the people who are there or the beings that exist there, and you will find out what it looks like and what it's like as you explore. Because going and searching the unknown is quite exciting compared to, oh, there's a map, we could go here, it's called this, what do we know about that place? Well, we could go here, there's nothing on the map, I don't know what's there, I don't know what it's called, I don't know who lives there. That's a lot more exploration going on now.
People are going to go towards the question mark that's drawn on the map.
Yeah.
So when I run games with people that I haven't run games for before, one of the things I do is I give them a questionnaire that has a whole bunch of poke your brain about your character's backstory, something to help them get started writing a backstory, because I like when they have that and they can provide that for me. But the most important question on there is not about their character, it's about them. And I ask them, what kind of player are you? And I break it down by what sort of things they enjoy. Recently, I've been putting these into a spreadsheet, and there is a huge pattern I found. There are two types of players that are the most common. The first is role-playing. This is separate from acting. Role-playing is making decisions in character. Acting is talking in character. Those are two very different things. Many people that like one might not like the other. But the other one that is even more popular than role-playing in role-playing games is exploration, learning new and relevant information about the world that they are in. So absolutely, exploring, you're absolutely correct. The exploring has to be a huge part of most games.
Yeah. And it plays into all of this, making much easier for you because you don't have to worry about that stuff being built straight away, and they're going and seeking the unknown. And I think it's a big factor, which makes the whole process of building a world so much easier too. So back to our castle, I'm thinking of some various castles.
We don't have any here in America. We're too new.
Yeah. But if you go European and the different types of castles, well, we can't call it a Disney castle because, for one thing, nobody's stupid enough to put that down because Disney would probably chase you in court.
We'll just turn it around, make that backwards as well, right? What's Disney backwards?
Well, it would be appalling. It'd start with a Y, so it might be a bit hard to deal with. I don't know. You'd have to write it down. Is it pronounceable? The other thing is
Yensid.
Yeah, it's pretty shit, isn't it? So
that's horrible.
it's pretty shit. But then if you look at the royals in England and the different types of castles that are there, you could literally just pull one of those out and just make it that. You
got
could
a favorite?
I got a favorite. I don't know if I've got any favorites. Frankly, when I think about castles, the only place that I always felt like was a castle but wasn't a castle, it would have to be the Emerald City. So let's call it the Emerald Castle, because the Emerald Castle is now made out of something that our players want desperately. Because if they ain't got a little pick or a big pick and are trying to chip off bits of emerald off the Emerald Castle, I don't know what's wrong with them. So
Ooh, and emerald might just be referring to the hue of the stone, when in reality it's just like coated in light copper that has heavily oxidized. That's
true. It doesn't have to be made out of emerald, but the Emerald City is pretty easy to sort of, sounds all right. It's pretty fantasy-ish. And then we need something else. We need one. We've got 4 places. We need 5, don't we? So we need one other thing that would sort of help us along the way. And I would go with something that is just disastrous. And desert is
a place you don't go.
You don't want to go. And the places you don't want to go is desert. A glacier would be a good one. You were talking about the glaciers, and I was thinking a glacier's not a bad one either. Another one that would work quite well is something like a swamp or a mire or a marsh area. So, the dreaded glacier is probably not. Don't roll off the
dreaded glacier. Ooh,
the dreaded glacier, or is it the dreaded desert? I think the dreaded desert might work a little bit easier for. It's a bit more convincing.
Desert of Dread.
The Desert of Dread. There you go.
Much sounds better. Easier to. It's catchier.
It's catchier. So there's 5. That wasn't terribly difficult. You got your locations. You got your 5 locations, and of course it will never be the end. And every time somebody throws you a bone as a player, like, oh, I really would like to go to a place like this, and now you make that new location and you're ready to go.
Yep.
It's
easy enough to just like put a name there that tells you exactly what it is.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got our 5 locations. We've got our 3 continents, our archipelago. We've got our map. We've got our starting location, that little village. We've got our pantheon. We've got our creation story.
Well, I would say government. Would be a good thing to look at. Now, that's if you have government. You do not need to have a world that includes government, but you have at least somebody who's in power in your world. So even if it's who or what the government is, if it's not that, it's at least who is ultimately in power in this world. You may have nobody who ultimately has power over the entire world. There may be just sort of fractured groups. And fractured groups makes more sense because then you have more of that element of the Wild West. If you haven't figured it out, I am a fan of old North American Wild West movies. Okay, but I'll point you that in direction. So everybody deals with government every single day of their life. You do, I do. So you actually know a lot about it. So it's not hard to figure out. And the only thing you really need is you need the different types of civilizations or government or power structures that exist. And there's actually, if you look in something like this, they'll give you quite a few. This is the Game Master Guide for Pathfinder First Edition. If you look in this book, they'll give you a bunch of them, which they stole out of, as it happens, the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition book. But ultimately, there aren't that many. They fall under the same structure. You've got the monarchy, which is basically ruled by a single sovereign leader, which would be like a king or a queen who's got limited power in terms of law, and they serve their citizens. So those are your kings, queens, or whatever you want to call it, overlord or whatever the heck. So that's one structure. We know what that is. That's feudalism, right? Most people will be familiar with that concept. Then you have democracy. Those of you who live in a democratic country are familiar with rulers being elected as representatives that you vote for. So that's actually very simple for anybody to figure out. Okay, if you want to have that system, you can. And if you don't live in a world like that, you probably know about it because you want to be there. So it's an easy...
There's a slight distinction I'd like to make.
Yes.
The actual a true democracy is not elected officials. It is everyone gets to vote on everything, which is ridiculous once you have a large enough population.
Yeah.
So we could do that. We could have it make it a true democracy where, like, every Friday, everyone in the town gathers in and around the marketplace or the courthouse or whatever, and they have an announcer saying, "Okay, these are the things we need to decide. Put in your vote into this box. Put green for this option, red for this option, whatever." That is also an option. There is also what we're in is technically a democratic republic where an elected group of people makes those decisions instead of everybody making them.
Yeah, and there's obviously different versions of that, but the concept ultimately is the same.
Yes.
There's a couple more. There's only actually three more basic concepts or structures. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but oligarchy, which is a government formed by a few
Oligarchy is how I've heard it.
Oligarchy?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it could be different because phonetics in New Zealand and North America are different.
Right, exactly.
But however it's pronounced, I know how it's spelled. That government
and it's not a fun one to look at. It's weird spelling.
It's a terrible word. It's ridiculous. So, but this is formed by a few people or a few families, and the easiest way to understand it is not by that word that I just pronounced. It's tribal. As soon as you say tribal, people understand exactly what we were talking about. We're talking about a collection of individuals who are probably connected by blood, and they control the community. They are the ones who make the major decisions, and it's passed on by blood. Then you got authoritarianism, which is essentially one individual usually, who controls and opposes free thought, actions. It's a dictatorship.
Yep.
Sorry. The last one is theocracy, which is where you have, say, a priest or clerics or something like that, somebody who's a representative of a church or a temple. They're basically agents for the deity, the key deity in that location. So those are your basic power structures, and you just pick one of those 5, and then you form it. And you only need one when you start off, because you're only dealing with that in one location, if at all.
Let's do, since we have a pantheon, we will go the religious route. What was the name of that one?
Theocracy. It's TheocraCy.
Got it.
And you'll find the concept of theocracy in both of the books that I showed you, people. So it's not hard to find. If you type it into Google, you'll find it easy. In fact, if you type in different types of government, it will spit out the basic government structures that exist. So it's not hard.
Yep.
And so now you only need to worry about what the system is. You don't need to necessarily know about the entire power structure. If it's one person who controls everything, then you need one name. And creating a name is easy. There's so many name generators out there. You can do that. That's not hard. Yeah.
Yes, it's true.
And also too, you don't have to have the same government structure or power structure in one location. You can have different power structures in different locations as they explore.
In fact, that is that has never happened in the history of the world, where the entirety of the world came under one government power structure.
Yep. Because a lot of people like different ways of living, and some people like different ways for people to live without a choice.
Exactly. That's where it gets dangerous.
Yes.
For here, we will do a theocracy. Do we have names for these continents yet?
No, we don't, but we don't need to have them because they haven't gone there yet. They may not even know what the name of the continent they're on is. They might even not know that they're on a continent. So we don't actually have names for it. But again, you don't need to name them. We could, but there's other things to be done. Species and race.
So we've got our government. Species
and race. Now I'm going to say this for those of you who are getting upset and want to go lineage and all this sort of stuff. Like, just stop, because the concepts behind species and race, and I think both words need to be used rather than saying we're going to go with one or the other. Wizard of the Coast is currently going through what I consider a treadmill of nonsense. Species kind of refers to different biological entities, but race refers to essentially the same basic biological entity, but there are variations to them. So if you think in terms of species as elf, but the high elf is a race part of the species of elf. I think that's the easiest way to consider it. So before you start getting worried about which word's useful, species, race in your world, they're both useful to you. And you think everybody here has come across enough different species or races, whichever you want to call it, that have encountered in their own exploration of time. So whether you want to go heavy onto humans and have races of humans, or whether you want to pull from fantasy fiction, whatever you do, you create five of them. That's all I need to deal with. That's your little microcosm that you're starting with. 5 is all you need to start with, and you build out from that. Instead of 30 or 35 or 50 or some crazy number like that, start with 5. And I suggest also too, if you want to create your own and not use somebody else's, modifying real world animals helps make fantasy species and races come to life, because that's what they've always done since the creators of other game systems do that. You can do the same thing, and you just select a handful. And I think the easiest way to get around that is just to pick up the player's handbook for whatever game system you're playing in. So if I was playing 5e, or any version of the game, I'd just like, okay, what's going to work for me? Well, I want humans there, so I'll put humans there. There might be different races within the humans, but I don't need to deal with that right now, because I'm probably only dealing with one race right now. But I can add things like a dwarf. I can add elves. I like the idea of dwarves and elves. I might like the idea of having goblins, gnomes, orcs.
Nope, that's 6 already.
That's 6.
Goblins and gnomes. We're done.
Yeah, we're done. We're done. Now, if you're thinking, oh, Fred, that's like, you did that really fast. And also too, like we know exactly what those things are because we've been exposed to them so much. So we don't actually need much more than a single word to do all the work for us.
Exactly.
And then we add in what we need later as we broaden the species out into different races. But you can also go with insectoid. You can also go with catfolk. You can also go with birdfolk. You can go with nautiloid. Whatever it is, it's just another oid. Humanoid, and there's another oid. So we just need the front bit of the oid, and we're in business. But yeah, it's done. So that wasn't too hard.
We got our 5. Human, dwarf, elf, goblin, and gnome are the intelligent species for our world.
Right. Well, we're only got half an hour, so we better get our ass to gear. Otherwise, we won't get this done.
I think so.
Yeah. Magic.
All right, we got our species. Magic. You know what?
Magic.
Let's wait. We can just cop out.
We could.
We can just say there's no magic.
We could. So
a world with no magic.
Yep. So I'm gonna put out the questions you want to ask yourself with magic. These are the questions you usually ask about magic. And it's probably the thing that people spend the most time on, and actually it's unnecessary to do so. So does the world have magic? Yes or no? Answer that question. Really, also, how does magic work in your world? Well, you don't need to worry about it because it's magical. It's mysterious. It's amazing. People might not know actually how magic works, so you don't actually have to explain that. It's one of those questions that really cracks me up.
Even Tolkien has a soft magic system.
Yeah.
How the magic system works in Lord of the Rings and its associated books, everything that takes place there, never explained. Ever.
No.
It just sort of happens.
Yeah. And that's the nature of magic. So is it high magic? Is it low magic? Is it very rare? So you just need to make the decision. Is it high or low? One of the key questions you need to ask yourself is, does your world have magic shops? Because it's the first question your players are going to ask.
Every time. I want
time.
to go buy magic items. Well, it costs 500 more times the gold you currently have.
Well, it might not even be that. It's like there are no magic shops here. You might have to go and find them. There may not be magic shops. You may have to go to somebody who actually can sell those sorts of things.
Or it's just a fetch quest.
Yeah, exactly. Or your magic shops may be not what you expected. You can't just go and buy a magic sword or magic armor, but you can buy healing potions and consumables, because that's the only thing that can be made cheap enough to be able to sell to people. Everything else takes too long. Also, is your magic connected to technology? Because if you have technology and you have magic, sometimes you want to connect it. Eberron's like this. So you decide what your technology is. We're going to talk about technology in a second. You decide how to connect that. Can the dead be brought back to life? So is the magic in your world, does it allow the dead to be brought back to life?
That's very important for any storytelling aspect, because that is something that sets, it can be explored heavily. And depending on whether it is permanent or not, matters a lot.
And that's essentially a yes or no answer. You just have to decide whether it is possible. Once you know that it is possible, then you decide how it can go. You can go about it later on. If it's no, then it's no longer an issue. Is transport achievable by teleportation? And that is, again, is a yes or no answer. And if it's a yes, then you build on, so how do you teleport from one location to another? How easy is it to do that? Are there types of magic? So are we dealing with schools of magic like D&D, or are we dealing with elemental magic like fire, earth, water, air, that sort of stuff, spirit, maybe? What is it? These are things that you don't need to actually do initially. These are questions often that you can leave till later. The only question you need to answer with your magic world is there magic or not? And do you have magic shops? And the rest of it, you can leave till later. You can answer those questions later. And then what restrictions does magic have in the world? Like something like Dark Sun, there's a lot of restrictions on magic. Things work very differently. It's more psionics than magic. But psionics is kind of magic, just in a different sense.
Exactly. We are, for this one, though, going to say no magic. And you mentioned technology. I kind of also want to cop out there as well. See if we can actually get a whole world built in these 2 hours.
Oh, we will.
So, no magic. And low technology.
Okay. So I have a list of different levels of technology as well. So decide what your technology is going to be in your world. Doesn't need to be restricted to the entire world. You may have different levels of technology throughout the world, but the only level of technology you need to worry about is where the players currently start. The rest of it, again, you don't need to do straight away. And because people know so much about technology in their life experience in schooling, most of you have been exposed to it. Unlike myself, I'm 51, so it's quite a shock to the system. I always looked at technology and fantasy or science fiction as like it's never going to happen. Now it becomes science fact and just terrifying. So you actually know so much about it. So your first steps, fire creation as an energy source is usually one of the first steps in terms of technology. So we probably have the ability to create fire in your world. Windmills and the mechanical movement of wind into something that does something for you, whether it moves water or creates power or it shifts, it grinds grain, that's probably your next step. Then steam-powered engines, where you heat water, you collect that steam, and then you use it to run pistons. Then, of course, you've got your burning fossil fuels to power a machine, where you have something that's explosive, that doesn't require quite so much energy to create, because the fuel itself is so explosive. Solar power, energy capture. A lot of people sort of forget that solar power is one of those things that you can incorporate quite easily into your games. Electrical generation that is stored later, and electrical generation can be generated from so many things, whether it's hydro, running water over some sort of wheel, whether it's a windmill, whether it's the breakdown of and decay of matter. You could actually use that. Powering things off the chemical reaction inside, like a vegetable, like a potato, like, is that how we're going to generate our electricity?
I've heard stories about how that's happening.
Apparently that can happen. Yeah, it can happen. You've got your storing radiation from atomic energy generation, whether that's fusion or fission. And then you have biological technology, where the technology is not mechanical, made out of wood or stone or metal, but it's the construction of biological matter in some way, which is kind of your next step. You're going into more science fiction. So since you said low, we're probably going to go, why don't we just go with fire and windmills? And that's it.
All right. No steam power.
No steam power yet. One of the things that really annoys me when I look at Game Master books that are supposed to help you design worlds, and they start talking about this, they do not list the different levels of technology for you.
Mm-hmm. They say just vaguely, how much technology do you want?
That's it. That's literally all they say. It's really stupid.
Well, we've done this enough. We know what we're doing.
Yeah. I think we're almost at the end there in terms of the basic structures that you require. But monster populations, I don't know about you, but if I'm going to run a science fiction adventure or a fantasy adventure, gosh, I want monsters. I want creatures. I want aliens.
That's what people come to the table for.
That's the thing. That's the icing on the cake, mate. And if you don't have the icing on the cake, you've just got something that's not a cake anymore. So
you're doing improv drama, which is a different beast entirely.
Yeah. I'm sure you can do it, but so what are the monsters in your world? So you can fill this out as you go. You never need to have all the monsters figured out that you would include in your adventure. One of the easiest ways to get an idea of what to include is finding out from the players. They will usually gravitate. You can tell when they're going through the monster manual and you're saying, stop doing that. Stop looking through the monster manual at the monsters. There'll be something that takes their fancy. So if it's D&D, if you don't have dragons in your world, I don't know why you're playing Dungeons and Dragons.
You're just playing dungeons.
Yeah, so dragons are going to be there for me. I don't know about you, Dennis.
I do like dragons. You know what? I'll take it even a step further.
Yes.
We are going to have the 3 different kinds of dragons. We are going to have the Western Sage dragons. Mm-hmm. So that's what D&D's dragons are. The classic 4-legged beasts that understand and are like intelligent creatures and live an ungodly number of years. So we have the Western Sages. And then we have the Western Brutes. Those are they're basically the same thing, but they're not intelligent. In typical, got your Skyrim and other video games and media, they are actually depicted as wyverns, meaning they don't have the front legs, they just have hind legs and wings.
Yep.
So we've got our Western beasts. And then the most interesting one to me, because it's the one I know the least about, is your Eastern Sages. That is the third kind of dragon. That is the long, flying, snake-like things found in the lots and lots of Far Eastern culture.
Okay, cool.
That is how I don't know if that's like a actual way to do it, but that is how I, in my head, break down dragons.
Well, somebody's mentioned Kraken. And so, yes, definitely, Kraken seems good. Now, the great thing about a Kraken...
I like that too.
Let's stick a Kraken in there. Now, the great thing about a Kraken is it's a main focus. Like a dragon, it's a main focus for an adventure. It's an adventure in itself. It's already written itself. The monster itself is the focus now. And the great thing about the Kraken, if you look at a squid is restricted to the water. But if you go octopus Kraken, octopus will come onto land and screw you up big time.
Yes, it will.
So when its food source and the water is gone, it is just going to crawl onto the land and eat everything along the coastline. So you can definitely incorporate it on land as well.
So if we have these three kinds of dragons and a kraken, then I think we should lean fully into this sort of big monster kaiju kind of thing, and that's what the monsters in this world are. They are walking natural disasters. What is the fifth one?
Well, I think the first thing, let's explain to people how to actually get your list together, because I know the first thing you're thinking is like, oh, there's so many different monsters, and there is no limit. So all we're doing is, this is your starting point. This is your starting point for the things you want to play with.
Everything here is a starting point.
Now, if your character's level 1, you're probably thinking, well, a dragon's too much for them and a kraken's too much for them. But the adventure is not about killing the dragon and the kraken. The adventure is going to be when they're starting at low level, when you start having to do that sort of thing. So it's not a waste of your time to start there. It's about figuring out how to survive the situation or help those who are trying to survive the situation. It's not about fighting the thing.
Yes, exactly. And if you do need those like low-level monsters that you need for enemies, we already made that list up here in intelligent species.
Exactly. And if you always fall back on the easy ones, orc and goblin. Mm-hmm. Orc and goblin.
Or goblin.
Yep.
Or if you wanna be mean to your players and tug some heartstrings and call to some moral questions, make them obviously intelligent, no matter what species they are.
Yeah.
Like, so, give the bandit a family.
Yeah. So what I tend to do when I'm selecting my mod, So yes, you give your orcs and goblins babies and family members moral dilemmas.
Your players will despise you for about an hour.
Yeah. But hey, Gary Gygax was on the right track when he did that with Keep on the Borderland. So I always open up a monster book and I just go through the monster book and I just pick out 5 monsters essentially that I think are going to work for me, roughly about that. And those are the first ones I want to sort of use and take inspiration from monster movies that to populate your world. If there's something that you see, books, novels, help fuel the imagination, steal all that stuff. And when you don't want to steal that stuff and you want to try and make your own stuff, drawing from real world biology and archaeology, particularly the more unfamiliar archaeology that's out there that is sort of hidden and off to the side, you can create your own monsters by jamming different creatures together to make something else. This is what Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and other publishers do all the time, is they just take existing animals and they jam them together to make a new monster. So you can do the same thing. But again, you pick up whatever monster book you've got and you just pick 5. So if we're going big time stuff, Giant's an easy one.
There you go.
If you wanted to make it simple for yourself, a giant's an easy one. And giants can be so many different things. You've got so many different possibilities. The Cyclops is not an IP thing. The Cyclops has always been around. That's Greek. So it's a type of giant. And you've got the Troll, which is kind of giants as well. So it's a different type of giant. It just works a little bit differently. Trolls are bound.
It's a giant that lives under a bridge. That's the only difference.
Or depending on what where you're drawing your inspiration from. So you've kind of got what you need, and after that you've really got the basic gist of what you require to do what you need to do. At that point, you're moving your world building stuff into writing an adventure, and that's not what today's about. Now, is there anything
that is an entirely different beast?
And I don't know about you, but I think a lot of people get really confused when they start doing world building. They start dealing with plot for the campaign, and that's not what you're trying to do, eh?
No. You need to work on the setting, and that's it. You need to be able to, in order to world build, you need to be able to separate the setting from the plot and the characters.
Yeah. You're dealing with the pieces. Now, are there any pieces that you can think of? Because for me, I always go with that's it. And the only reason why I don't go any further with this is because, one, it would be an infinite process, which is going down the rabbit hole that I was talking about before, that you know about as well, where you never get it done. People, you just need to just start, just get it done. Like, if you can't get your stuff together in 2 hours max and get going, then you're never gonna get it going. You know what I mean? It could be 6 months, it could be a year. You may die before you ever get to run it. So we don't want that to happen. But there are 2 other things that tend to crop up that can be helpful, and that is a world threat. The world threat does not need to be dealt with right now, but you can note it down. It's a single sentence. Whatever it might be, it's a single sentence. There's a world threat, but you don't know what it is. Is it a plague? Is it zombies rising from the dead? Is it
one of the stars in the night sky is getting bigger?
Well, you've got a meteor about to hit and strike the world. I guess the other thing, a lot of people kind of fall into the trap of thinking this is world building, and that is non-player characters. You're always going to be building non-player characters for your adventures, but it's actually part of the adventure building aspect rather than the world building aspect.
Like I said, setting, plot, characters. NPC that's a character. That's not setting.
And so the easy route for that, for those of you who are like, okay, we need to do that, don't get stuck on the NPCs, because you will be doing that, but you'll be doing that as part of your adventure building, because you only need to build as many NPCs as the adventure requires. And anything extra you will deal with as you need to. And the easiest way to do this, cheat sheet for this one for people, is name generators, or create some names from real life. I pull names from real life all the time, or using books, television, movies. But there's a couple of things. You need a name. You want a personality trait, at least one. Preferably just one rather than 2 or 3. Yeah. You want maybe a flaw, ideal, bond. It sounds very familiar. You want a motivation. You want a motivation, and maybe you have a secret, but not all NPCs have secrets. If you want to strip it right down to its bare elements, then a name and a motivation. And if
you are working on, I find that if you're talking, enjoy getting into these characters, like acting as them, then I think that another one you can add in there is what they're afraid of. Give them a fear.
Yep. Yeah, and your flaw might be your fear. So I mean, a lot of these things can sort of cross over into it. So, but yes, I agree. If you're really stripping things down, I'd go name, motivation, and appearance, and you've probably got enough to get by. Do you know what I mean? Even if you leave out personality trait, as long as you got the motivation and you got a name. Because the first thing the players are going to do is ask them what their name is. So you've got to have something like that.
Yep. And you need I know of many DMs that just have a list of first names that they just have up at all times.
Yeah.
And they just cross them out and write down a location when they actually use them.
Yeah. And an appearance, I think the easiest ways to deal with that is just to cheat. One of the worst things you can do is jump onto the internet and look for images on the internet. Don't do that. Because what you'll do is you'll have an idea for your NPC that you're going to put in this world, and unfortunately, you'll never find an image that quite matches with the NPC that you created. But if you have an image,
start with the image.
Start with the image. If you're going to use images, start with the image, or you just go buy yourself a pack of face cards. It's just a pack of cards with different pictures, different portraits, and you just use that, and you're ready to go.
It works. We have a super chat. I think this is actually my second super chat of this entire channel. So thank you so much, Charles, for that. That's amazing. You both agreed on pulling from literature you've read. Mm-hmm. If there is time at the end, which I think there is, we're pretty much done. We have our world threat now as well. Would either of us care to say what literature we found ourselves pulling from in our past creations? Well, Fred, you mentioned earlier, big fan of Wizard of Oz.
Oh, yes. Yes, that I've used the Wizard of Oz. Yes, I ran an adventure. By the way, Charles Butler is one of my patrons, so thank you for being over here and contributing to Dennis.
Welcome, Charles. Thank you again.
Me and Dennis get along like a house on fire, and
wait, what does that mean?
That means that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a colloquial saying for Kiwis. You'll understand if you're from New Zealand, maybe even from Australia. But yeah, no, that means it goes on well. I get along with Wally very well as well. So yes. So thank you, Charles. I pull from the Wizard of Oz a lot, but I actually love Greek mythology, and so I've I think D&D has just strip mined Greek mythology so much.
It really has. That's a great way to put it. I love that analogy.
And that's fine, That's fine. I actually
it is, yeah.
One of the best books they've ever put out is a campaign book. And you know how I feel about talking about Wizards of the Coast, because the rest of their stuff is shit, is Theros. And I know it's Magic the Gathering, but it's heavily borrowed and stolen and strip mined from Greek mythology. And I love that they've done that, because I would use it. I would use it. It's great. It's got all the tools. That book's set up so well. If they'd made their books like that rather than the way they make Spelljammer, people might actually like them a bit more. So yeah, that's the one I would go for. But if I don't have that book, then I would just be going onto the internet and just pulling from Greek mythology. That's my go-to. What about you?
Most of what I do is I don't read a whole lot of books anymore. It's something that I just wish I had time for. Like, last time I read a book, I was on vacation for a week, and I blew through a 500-page book in 2 days. And it felt amazing. I can't sit down and do that kind of reading anymore. The book that I blew through was Christopher Paolini's To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. It came out in 2020. It is, he's the guy that wrote Aragon, and that one in particular is sci-fi. I bring him up because I loved the Aragon series as a kid, and I draw from that heavily, especially when it comes to dragons, because he is a very cool and super fleshed out way that dragons work in that world. And their magic system is also amazing. It's one of the ones that has an actual language that is connected to the magic. You need to say these words, but spoilers, magic system changes once you get higher level. It was just something that I remember really well from my childhood, and I think things I read in my childhood is a good descriptor of what I draw inspiration from. So, and it's not necessarily reading, it's like movies, Harry Potter. Whenever I have a wand in a game, I will describe it like a simple wand that you would see in Harry Potter. What else have I got? I've got, I saw, as a family, we watched a lot of Star Trek. Mm-hmm. So if I need something that is truly alien, I'll just pull one of the weirdest things that they had on costumes on those shows. That is, and obviously Lord of the Rings as well, because that's just the staple in the genre now. It literally created the tall elves. Before Tolkien, elves were Santa elves. Very, very different things.
Sorry, dude. I gotta pull away for just a second. I will be back in just a minute.
All right. So what else have I got? We've got Dune. I finished Dune recently. The book, with the second trailer is out now, which I'm very, very excited for. The director is fantastic. And I think that it's not just world building inspiration that I'm pulling from these places, it's also story inspiration because when I run games, I like to make it as the best story that I can. So I'm looking at classic, hero's journey story structure, classic Star Wars kind of thing where, you have your hero that goes out on a journey, hero's journey, hero that goes on a journey. Good job. What else? The mentor that usually dies near the beginning. I have that in my longer term campaigns a lot, actually. What else do I have? Venture into the unknown. That happens very, very early because, like we said earlier, it is part of what most players like about role-playing games is the exploring this new place, exploring into the unknown. That's most of where I get my inspiration from, though. As far as actual literature that I've read, pretty much just Aragon and Harry Potter at this point are the ones that I can remember. I've also read a couple of other ones, like I remember reading Fablehaven. I remember reading a lot of, I remember the cover of many, many different fantasy series that I read as a kid. It's all good. And I remember the covers of those series, but I don't remember the names of them, and I only vaguely remember what happens in them. But I still pull inspiration from those vague memories. There was one about a golem whose power resided in its single eye, like a cyclopean golem. Don't remember the book. It was part of a series, but I remember pulling that and putting it into a one-shot that I ran once, just like using that idea as the driving force of a story. Just talking about where else I get inspiration from. And the list is actually a lot longer than I thought it was.
Well, when you ask people that question, they always sort of start with the easy stuff, and then they start realizing that there's actually a lot more sources.
Yes.
I find
exactly what just happened.
I find really interesting when people say they pull from music, because I don't pull from music. But
Really?
there are people out there who pull their ideas probably because they process differently. They probably process by audio rather than visual, or from reading, And so,
Out of curiosity, what sort of music do you listen to? Like what would you consider your type?
so I'm a fan of Enya. I like Pink. I would say a lot of folk music is probably more appropriate for me, I guess. Bob Dylan.
Okay.
But the truth of the matter is, I had a hard time quite a few years back when I had a sort of change in my job. And I've been listening to Whitney Houston in my car nonstop for the last 4 years. And I still don't know the words. But at the end of the drive, I feel comfortable. At the end of my night, when I've finished work and it's been torturous, or it's been a struggle to stay alive, or stay sane, and safe.
Yep.
Whitney Houston is still singing her songs, so I draw a lot from there. But
I have a very, very strange music taste, and I've only met a couple of other people that match it, and it's that anything that has lyrics that are in a language that I understand, fortunately for me, that's just English, is music that I immediately just like it less. If it is music that has lyrics that are in a different language or has no lyrics, I will like it more. Like the music we're listening to in the background now, just like calming, orchestral, sort of soundscapes or soundtracks from movies. That is my music type, and that is kind of hard to draw inspiration from for writing a story because there's no words. Like so I can see how people would draw inspiration from music if the music they're drawing from has lyrics. Mine doesn't.
Yeah, I don't operate that way, but I find it interesting when people do. Star Wars is another one. I'm big on Star Wars. I like Star Wars a lot.
Yep.
We're not going to go into the details of what happens right now with Star Wars programming and so forth. But,
Andor was good. That's all I'll say.
yeah, I've got 14 different books on my shelf that just have to do with Star Wars saga. That doesn't count all the other Star Wars RPG stuff that's behind me. But unfortunately, even though Star Wars is popular, Star Wars RPGs don't really get that much love. And as you know, I have turned away from the almighty, what is it, the greatest role-playing game in the world? So yeah, but for me, I love Dungeons and Dragons. I love Star Wars. I love Greek mythology. I love a lot of the mythology around the Egyptians and stuff like that. I do look at a lot of stuff regarding history. And after this live stream, the first thing I'm going to do is drink some more water and have some food. And then I'm going to sit down and read a book. And they're all almost. I've got Esper's Emporium of Esoterica, in fact, right in front of me, that I'll be reading shortly on my bed, probably. And Tome of Beasts 2 and 3. I just like those sort of things, and I really like monsters. So, which is weird because I don't really like horror that much, but monsters, fantasy, it's right up my alley.
A long time ago, I didn't really like horror either. But the more I'm exploring the genre through the lens of tabletop role-playing games, the more I realize, oh my god, this is amazing. What have I been missing out on? But, to each their own. Personally, when we're done with live streaming here, I'm not going to go read a book. I am going to go get more water, eat something, and then I will be hopping back on my computer to actually play in an actual play streamed game. Over on Twitch, on Cybernation Uncensored is the name of the channel, and we will be playing a game of the Fallout RPG. The video game series Fallout. Mm-hmm. There's an RPG for it, and it's amazing. We have a ton of fun over there.
Yeah,
that's what I'll be doing tonight.
Oh, that sounds cool. There's actually a lot of fan-made stuff for 5e.
There's a Star Wars 5e that's huge.
Yes.
Just runs on the same rule set.
And people don't know that there's 4 books and they're free. The website, there's got a whole website, all the stuff.
It's completely, you know what? I'm going to see if I can pull it up and throw it in chat for everyone.
Yeah. So I've talked about this before, and there are a few of you probably already here who already know about that. But I'm going to talk about The Last Airbender, because there's a Last Airbender 5e conversion that somebody's made.
5e?
5e.
I know they just came out with their
I know.
own...
This is different. This is free. This is a free PDF. It's different to that. It's completely. It's been around a lot longer.
I haven't spent money on the actual one yet. Then
no. There's a League of Legends.
To look into that.
So those of you who play video games, League of Legends is a video game, right?
Yep.
There's a 5e League of Legends handbook, campaign book. There's a mass
I have
effect.
been underestimating how many people have been converting this into other things.
So this is appropriate because we were talking about world building. So people have built worlds on existing IPs, knowing fully well they can't make any money off it, but people want to play in that world and do their own thing.
Use rules that they know.
And they're using rules that they know because they're quite new and they don't want to go and try a completely new system, or there's no game system for it. So Mass Effect has a 5e PDF.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You got Star Wars 5e, but you've got Wands and Wizards, which is Harry Potter 5e adapted.
Mm-hmm.
I've
heard of that. I did not know it was 5e adapted, though.
It is 5e adapted. You've got Flash Gordon for anybody who's old enough to know what Flash Gordon was. Flash Gordon's got a 5e conversion. It's quite extensive too. Final Fantasy has got a compendium for 5e that somebody's built. Monster Hunter. So the Monster Hunter video game, they didn't build a system. It was unnecessary. all they did was build a monster manual PDF for Monster Hunter 5e.
Yep, that tracks.
Super Mario Brothers has a 5e book as well that you can download as a PDF. Legend of Zelda has a 5e, Breath of the Wind, I think it's called. Stranger Worlds, which I don't know what the heck that is, but there's a 5e adaptation. Dragon Ball Z has got a 5e conversion.
What?
Yes. Warhammer 40,000 has got its own RPGs, but somebody decided, no, I don't want to learn a different system.
I don't want to learn a one. I'd rather stay in this one rule set and put in a crap ton of work instead of just learning a new rule set.
Yeah, apparently. So somebody made a Warhammer 40,000 5e PDF. There's a Plane Shift Equestria 5e conversion, which I think is My Little Pony.
I think so.
I think it's My Little Pony. And then there's Elder Scrolls 5e. Somebody actually made an Elder Scrolls 5e. So
that tracks.
You either make your own world or you use somebody else's, and you don't actually have to use somebody else's world that they put into a book and pay for it if you don't really want to, because you can just go and get this stuff.
What we've learned here is that if you want to play 5e in a different, using someone else's IP, you can. It already exists.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You just have to find it.
You just have to find it. Yeah. And if you don't want to have anybody else's IP and you want totally your thing, piece of piss, you can get it done. Easy pieces.
Well, thank you, Fred, so much for joining me. This has been a ton of fun, like I knew it would be. We have our world that will probably never see the light of day. This is the only time anyone will ever touch it because you and I constantly build worlds. So if we need one, we'll just build a new one.
That's right. How long did it take? 30 seconds? Well, kind of. Maybe 2 hours.
It depends on when you. It's never going to be done. So arguably, it was finished before we started, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you everyone in chat for sticking around. This has been a ton of fun watching all of your comments scroll through as Fred and I just goof off for 2 hours. Other things I'm doing, I know I haven't been on the YouTubes a whole lot. I am currently designing my own RPG because the world doesn't have enough of those already. The reason I'm doing it is because it's actually so much fun. I'm learning so much about game design and, what goes into publishing a game. Huge learning curve, having a great time constantly doing this. The name of the game is Sagas. There is a video, I think it's still connected, pinned on my channel's homepage if you're interested. There's also links to go in there to sign up for an email where we send out free stuff and updates on the game. We are inching closer and closer to the beta test. Fred, I might come to you asking if you want to try a new game.
Well, I'm already writing my own as well. I've got mazes and monstrosities, but I don't know about play testing because I'll be probably play testing my own system. But if you have a game system and you need somebody to promote it, Wally sent me his book, so I promoted.
He's not even here, but we need this every stream.
Yeah, almost every stream. No, that's not true. I pick it when it's appropriate, but I just tell people, send me your stuff physically, and I'll promote it. Don't send me the PDF, just send me the actual thing, and pay the god awful freight cost to get it to my country, and I'll promote it because apparently I deal with role playing games, not just Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm quite happy to talk about pretty much anything under the sun nowadays.
Awesome. Well, we will connect with that off stream instead of boring all of our viewers away.
Yeah.
For now, I will say good night. Fred might just say goodbye because we're so far apart on opposite ends of the world. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and I will see you next time.